Class 11. First Carnatic War. It was the part of and the result of the Australian War of Succession. War was won by the Dupleix. However, in North America, British were the victorious, and for France, its American position was more important. Therefore, under the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle 1748, France regained its position in North America while the British returned Madras. Second Carnatic War 1749 to 54. Dupleix got an opportunity in the form of succession dispute in Hyderabad and Carnatic. In Hyderabad, Nasir Jung versus Muzaffar Jung, and Carnatic, Muhammad Ali versus Chanda Sahib. Dupleix supported Chanda Sahib and Muzaffar Jung supported by France as the wanted economic and political benefit after the putting his choice of Carnatic in the power. Therefore, the annexation British EIC support Muhammad Ali and Nasir Jung. Dupleix and the Bassi owned the first phase by the 1751, while the Robert Clive of British EIC owned the second phase by the 1754. After first phase, Muzaffar Jung was the declared Nizam of Hyderabad and Chanda Sahib of Ayerkot/Carnatic. Muzaffar Jung was killed on his away from Carnatic to Hyderabad by Nawab of Kurnool as he had supported Muzaffar Jung, but now feared a breach of the promise of treaty made by the Muzaffar Jung. The now Bassi continued to march to Hyderabad and inflicted colossal terror. He put the Salabat Jung in the power in Hyderabad and placed a French military for the protection of Nizam. This military was to be paid for the Hyderabad. Therefore, the French EIC got northern Sarkars from Hyderabad. Other French gained after the first phase. Bassi was stationed as a French agent in the Hyderabad court. The establishing the French political influence in Hyderabad, personal jagirs for Bassi and the 200,000 pounds for the French EIC. In Karnataka, huge personal jagir for Dupleix. Dupleix was declared as a Nawab of all lands between River Krishna and Cape Cameroon, with Chanda Sahib as a Nawab of Ayerkot. After second phase victory by the British, Dupleix was recalled by France in 1754 due to the higher war expenditure. Also, France wanted to honor the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle 1748 to secure its asset in America. Chanda Sahib surrendered but was still beheaded despite the promise of the life by the Robert Clive. The France was allowed to retain territory around the Pondicherry, its factory in Karnataka, northern Sarkars and French agent at Hyderabad court. Muhammad Ali became the Nawab of Karnataka. Therefore, French influence in Hyderabad and British influence in Karnataka was the net result of the Second Carnatic War. Third Carnatic War 1756 to 63 result and the part of the 7-year global war 1756 to 63 fought between the Britain, France and their respective alliance. It was fought in the Europe, Africa, America and India. Count de Lally arrived from France to lead the French military along with the Bassi, who was in the charge of northern Sarkars, while Robert Clive played an essential role from the British side. The royal military of the Britain and France arrived in India. Why did France lose? First, the tactical mistake. Bassi left northern Sarkars granted to help Delhi in the Carnatic, leading to the loss of northern Sarkars to the Britain. Second, poor leadership of Lely. He was the hated among the French official and sepoy due to his rude conduct which hurt the army's morale. Third, they surprised British Navy. 3. The superior British Navy. 4. The superior financial strength of Britain and British EIC while the France faced the financial difficulty. For example, French soldiers were the unpaid for the month which hurt the morale. Britain had the witnessed growth earlier than the France during the Industrial Revolution in Britain with more significant trade profit as trading with the more resigned and honored time, whereas the feudalism ended in France very late. The result of the war was the question of the domination over the international trade in India was the decided in the British favor. Most decided was the Battle of the Vandivas and the French lost all over the including Pondicherry. France lost all gain made since 1749 under Dupleix. Therefore, French were restricted to their base. They were the barred from the fortifying their base and from keeping a strong military. In 1769, French EIC was ended by France. French continued in the Chandannagar and Pondicherry. The high number of British Royal Military troops arrived in India in favor of EIC, giving EIC the military advantage over Indian states. For example, they left confident enough to start the Battle of Plassey in 1757. Long-term effect of Carnatic Wars. Post 1757, EIC began maintaining a large army with the help of the loot of Bengal. Now EIC began increasing its political influence and started empire building in 1757. In 1766, Hyderabad gave the northern Sarkars to EIC in return for military protection against Mysore and Marathas. In 1798, Hyderabad became the first state to sign a subsidiary alliance that brought military and foreign policy under EIC. The huge territory of Mysore was annexed by the 1799 via the Third Carnatic and Fourth Anglo-Mysore War, and the subsidiary alliance signed by the Mysore in 1799. After the death of any ally, Muhammad Ali Karnataka was annexed in 1801. In 1805, subsidiary alliance was signed with Travancore. Peshwa signed a subsidiary alliance in 1803 to regain Peshwaship with British help. In the Third Anglo-Maratha War, Maratha lost the significant territory and Sindhya of Gwalior signed a subsidiary alliance. Therefore, EIC began political influence in South India with the Carnatic War and dominated South India politically by the early 19th century. Bengal and EIC/Battle of Plassey. The origin of conflict was Farrukh Sir's royal Farman of 1770. It gave the EIC the right to duty-free trade in Bengal, Gujarat and Deccan, and the right to use the royal mint. It gave the minting of the 38 villages around Calcutta. Murshid Quli Khan allowed duty-free trade to EIC but did not allow the misuse of dastak for private trade by EIC officials. He also did not allow the use of royal mint and allowed renting of villages but not their purchase by EIC. Therefore, royal farman became the origin of the conflict. However, misuse of dastak began and continued. Dastak was the document issued by the EIC official that certified a set of the goods for EIC goods and therefore the entitled to duty-free trade. Therefore, the dastak operationalized the duty-free trade privileges given by the royal firman and the misuse of the dastak implied duty in invasion by EIC official as they wrongly claimed their private trade as a EIC trade. Class 12 Battle of Plassey. Short-term reason: misuse of dastak and illegal trade. By the 1750s, 100,000 pounds were the quantum of the private trade by EIC official, which was the 50 times their annual salaries. EIC officials also sold dastak to the non-EIC merchants. Nawab of Bengal lost the huge amount of the revenue due to the misuse of dastak, that is tax duty evasion. And the private trade of EIC official hurt the economic interest of EIC as well as, but EIC was unable to control it. Illegal trade, the charter of EIC gave the monopoly to EIC over British trade while will all territory to the east of Cape of Good Hope and therefore the trade with the India by anyone other than the EIC was the illegal. For the example, private trade of EIC officials and trade by the non-EIC merchants from Britain. Interlopers were non-EIC British merchants who trade illegally in India. Free merchant trade was also illegal but the artificially legalized as EIC allowed them to settle in EIC establishment if they agreed to act as a middleman between India and merchants and EIC instead of directly trading with India. That is, they sold the Indian goods to EIC in India instead of the exporting themselves. Britain, France rivalry. EIC feared the French and was afraid of the French repeating their success in Karnataka. Therefore, the EIC began the adding fortification in Calcutta in 1755 without the permission of Alwardi Khan. EIC officials also offered the protection to fugitives from the Nawab's court. Therefore, the EIC challenged the sovereign authority of the Nawab. However, Alwardi Khan avoided conflict and followed the diplomacy role of Sirajud-Dowlah. He acted in the haste and stopped all the misuse of dastak, therefore hurting the private trade of EIC officials. When the British gave the asylum to the Krishna Vallabh charged with the fraud with Siraj, and EIC began a new fortification in Calcutta. Siraj acted. He took over a British factory in Kasim Bazar near Hooghly and attacked the captured Calcutta and renamed it Ali Nagar. Also during his attack, Black Hole Treasury in Calcutta, thereby the 30 British men were killed due to suffocation because of the overcrowding in a non-ventilation room. This created a huge controversy among the British. The events: Robert Clive arrived with the army from the Madras and the defeated Siraj took back Calcutta and signed the Treaty of Ali Nagar with Siraj, which restored all privileges of EIC. Then the British defeated the French in Chandan and destroyed the Hooghly port important for the French. Now Jagat Seth and the Mir Jafar bribed EIC and Robert Clive, so they replaced Siraj with Mir Jafar as a Nawab. Mir Jafar was the war commander of Bengal army. He was rivalry in the court between the merchants, bankers, zamindars and nobles. Siraj was hated due to his disrespectful conduct, and Indian merchants and bankers benefited greatly for their businesses with EIC. Mir Jafar ensured that the majority of Bengal army did not fight in the Battle of Plassey in 1757 when EIC attacked. Therefore, Siraj was defeated easily by the Robert Clive. Siraj ran away, later captured and killed. Result: significance of Battle of Plassey. Now Mir Jafar was the puppet Nawab of EIC. EIC military domination of Bengal began. Therefore, the beginning of the political supremacy of EIC in India. Plassey plunder 1757 to 65. 275,000 pound to Royal Military for distribution to their members. 2.25 crore rupees to EIC. Personal Jagir for Clive is worth 35,000 pound per annum and 234,000 pound in the cash to him. From 1757 to 65, 2.5 billion pounds were taken by EIC as a political gift from the Nawab of Bengal. Changes in the structure of EIC trade. Now gold was now more needed by Britain to buy Indian goods, as Indian money was now used to buy Indian goods. Indian gold was used to buy Chinese goods, and Indian gold was taken to Britain. Therefore, from gold outflow pre 1757, now there was the gold and wealth inflow of Britain. Therefore, the drain of wealth from the India began after 1757, and this also led to a huge dip in Bengal revenue. Now, rampant misuse of Dastak and EIC official made personal Fortune's example. Clive, governor of Calcutta Presidency. When Mir Jafar could not pay any more to EIC, he was replaced with his son-in-law Mir Qasim by the EIC. Battle of Buxar 1764. Background: Mir Qasim was an efficient administrator and wanted independence from EIC control. Therefore, shifted his base from the Murshidabad to Bihar to be physically away from British. He gathered money and started building his army. To get the support of Indian merchants, he abolished all taxes on domestic trade, therefore bringing party between Indian merchants and British traders who did not pay any taxes when they did domestic trade through their Indian agent called Gomust Shah. This hot revenue of Bengal, but the Qasim wanted to support the Indian merchants. EIC did not like the state of the independence in Qasim, and thus defeated the replaced Qasim with Mir Jafar. Now Qasim escaped with the wealth to Awadh and built an alliance with Siraj-ud-Dawla, Nawab of Awadh, and Shah Alam, Mughal emperor, who was in Awadh. Fugitive Princess Shah Alam II escaped Delhi due to the fear of life from the Imadul Mulk Wazir and grandson of Nizauddaulah. He was also frustrated with Delhi court politics and wanted to build the kingdom in the east, that is Bengal, which had supported sending revenue to Delhi since Walwardi Khan. Siraj-ud-Dawla agreed to the promise of the 30 billion rupees Bihar and its treasury for the Awadh lack of modern nationalism. Reason for defeat: a tactical mistake by Souza, who followed an offensive treasury rather than the more appropriate defensive strategy of cutting off the supply lines of EIC army in Buxar, and he also ignored the advances of Qasim. Therefore, the Victor Munro merged emerged victorious, and now EIC sent Clive from London to India and negotiate the Treaty of Allahabad. The Treaty of Allahabad 1765, EIC treated Shah Alam with respect as in the law over sovereignty of India, and with him on their side, EIC could have the greater influence in India. The Treaty of Allahabad was signed between Robert Clive of EIC and Shah Alam II and Shujaud-Dowla. EIC promised an tribute of 26 lakh rupee per annum to the emperor, although never gave his help. EIC promised Shah Alam II military help to recapture Delhi, which was under the Rohilla Afghans since 1761, although never helped recaptured. Class 13. Treaty of Allahabad. Treaty of Allahabad and Bengal. EIC got Diwani from Orissa, Bengal and Bihar. That is Revenue Administration and Revenue of Bengal Suba. Therefore, for first time, EIC took over the sovereign function. Therefore, the EIC got an additional source of income in the form of revenue from the richest provinces of India. The dual government 1765 to 72 of Bengal. The legally Diwani revenue administration was given to EIC and Nizamat non-revenue administration with the Nawab of Bengal. The policy of indirect rule was initiated in Bengal as Nawab of Bengal became a puppet of EIC. As a British resident, now the station in court. The British resident in 1772 became the actual center of power. EIC also got the right of appoint duty Subedar who headed the Nizamat on the behalf of Nawab. Therefore, through him, EIC indirectly controlled the Nizamat. Therefore, in the practice, EIC got full control of Bengal, that is Diwani, as well as Nizamat. Legally, dual government from the 1765 to 72, practically EIC can rule legally in Diwani and indirectly in Nizamat, but did not as EIC appointed duty Subedar Muhammad Reza Khan, who headed or ruled the Nizamat on the behalf of the Nawab, also as the Diwan of EIC. Therefore, Indian administration under the Indian Deputy Subedar continued till 1772. The dual government was ended due to the worsening law and order, and the Warren Hastings wanted to improve the administration. Therefore, EIC established direct rule of its own in the both Diwani and Nizamat in 1772. The Treaty of Allahabad and Awadh. Shuja was made to pay 5 million rupees. Shuja was now the puppet and British resident could now be stationed in Awadh court. The policy of the ruling France was initiated by the Clive, but was associated mainly with the Warren Hastings. The policy of the ring fence meant the creating a buffer around the core interest regions of EIC by signing a military alliance with the neighbors. The military alliance was signed between Awadh and EIC. Therefore, now EIC could use Awadh military resources for the protection of EIC interest in Bengal. Awadh come under the military control of EIC as the EIC army station in Awadh permanently, as it was to be paid for Awadh in the annual subsidy duty-free trade in Awadh. Therefore, Treaty of Allahabad with Awadh was a mini subsidiary alliance. Subsidiary alliance / subordinate alliance. It was a policy initiated by the Wellesley. There was a ban on the imperial expansion by the Pitt's India Act because of the huge war expenditure by EIC. Therefore, British wanted to consolidate gain made from these war was prevent war expenditure. Therefore, now EIC was The policy of indirect rule and the maintain the balance of power began Indian state. Wellesley was in the empire builder and had huge personal political ambition in British polity. He gave the policy of the indirect rule and the balance of power and the initiated the policy of expansion. He convinced the British government by the overplaying the fear of Napoleon attacking India after the allying with the Indian state like Mysore. Napoleon attacked Egypt in 1798 to control Middle East and halt British trade by the dominating the Arabian Sea. He also had the ambition of re-establishing French influence over India and was in communication with Tipu. However, there was no real threat of the French invading India, and the British knew it until the government agreed to the Wellesley as the primary goal of British foreign policy was to be protected India from the European rivals. The Wellesley found a middle path in the form of a subsidiary alliance that led to the supremacy over Indian state without annexation. The Model Treaty of Subsidiary Alliance, British protection to the Indian state against its neighbors and also against the internal threat of law and order instability. For this EIC station its military permanently in the Indian state. State to pay for the maintenance of EIC army station in the form of annual subsidy. The British resident stationed in the court of and the Indian ruler. British consent was the needed for the stationing and Europeans in court. India states must consult Governor General while the negotiating with Indian ruler of foreigner power. The promises of now non-interference by EIC in the internal affair of Indian state. Impact of the subsidiary alliance on Indian state. There was a drain of wealth in the form of subsidiary to EIC and subsidiary was high. EIC gradually increased the amount of subsidiary demanded. Now EIC could maintain a large army to expense of Indian state as money for their large army come in the form of subsidiary. At times Indian ruler gave the territory to EIC as payment of subsidiary. For example, in 1801 half of Awadh was given. There was a loss of job for military men as the army of the Indian state was disbanded. Indian ruler has to raise taxes to pay subsidies and that made him too unpopular. Peasants come under the oppression of high land revenues and this they increase the chances of peasant revolt. Indian rulers were the cause of the maladministration while they had no power as the British did not respect the promises of non-interference in internal affairs and British residents established their indirect rule. Indian state lost the power to settle border dispute with each other, therefore now could not unite as lost control the foreign policy. They also lost the ability to the self-defense as they had to disband their armies. Hyderabad was the first to sign a subsidiary alliance in 1798 due to fear of Maratha and Mysore. The significant treaty of the Mysore after the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War in 1799. The Mysore signed a subsidiary alliance in 1799. In 1801, Karnataka was annexed after the death of EIC ally Muhammad Ali in 1795. In 1701, Awadh signed a subsidiary alliance and half of Awadh was annexed as permanent payment of subsidy. In 1802, Gaikwad of Baroda signed a subsidiary alliance in return for EIC help in the succession dispute. In 1803, Peshwa Baji Rao II signed a subsidiary alliance in return for EIC help to regain Peshwaship after he was removed by the Holkar of Indore. After the defeat in Second Anglo-Maratha War, Sindhya of Gwalior signed a subsidiary alliance and significant territory of Maratha Sardar annexed by EIC. In 1805, Travancore signed a subsidiary alliance in return for military help to suppress a revolt by Nayar troops due to the low salary. Wellesley was recalled in 1805 due to the high war expenditure. Class 14 Anglo-Mysore War. Reason for the animosity between the Mysore versus EIC Hyderabad Maratha and Travancore. Mysore wanted to dominate the whole of South India politically, therefore rivalry with Indian neighbourings. Mysore wanted to dominate the trade of South India, and this was the interest of EIC. Therefore, the rise of Mysore as a political, military, and the mercantilistic fulfillment of profit motive via trade power threatened the British. Mysore allowed the policy of the military factionalism, which was similar to the policy followed by EIC. Mysore used the resources from land revenue and trade to modernize its military with the help of the French. Therefore, it competed with the EIC in the core interesting area of EIC. Thus, it threat to EIC. In the fourth Anglo-Mysore War, usually Hyderabad and Marathas fought on the side of EIC, except in 1780 to 82 when there was an alliance between Marathas Hyderabad and Mysore against EIC. And Nana Fadnavis was the first to realize the political ambition of EIC in India. Therefore, they took the initiative to create the above alliance, the first Anglo-Maratha, and so was the second Anglo-Mysore War in 1780 to 1784, while the Hyderabad was the turning against EIC as EIC took over Guntur. However, EIC soon settled dispute by the returning Guntur to Hyderabad and signing the Treaty of Salbai in 1782. The ended the war with the Maratha and creating the military alliance between EIC and Marathas. Therefore, the breaking an alliance of the Indian power and the replacing it with the triple alliance of EIC, Hyderabad and Marathas by the 1782. Also, the aggressive foreign policy of Tipu contributed to the isolation of Mysore, a result of the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War. In the First and Second Mysore War, 1766 to 69 and 1780 to 84, status quo was maintained territorially. However, the Mysore lost the roughly half of the treaty to EIC, Maratha and Hyderabad in the Third Anglo-Mysore War in 1789 to 92. Malabar and Mahal and Dindugal. Further major loss of treaty in the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War when Tipu died, defeating his capital Srirangapatnam, and was the Wadiyar dynasty was restored to power, and the subsidiary alliance was signed with the More in 1799. EIC focused on the tackling over the coastal area like the Malabar, Kannada and the surrounding Mysore, Travancore. In 1800, a British resident was stationed in Travancore. Therefore, EIC influence began after the strict rule of the Martand Varma and Rama Varma ended. In 1805, there was a revolt by Nayar troops due to the grievances related to the salary, and Travancore signed a subsidiary alliance in return for military help by EIC. However, the promises of non-interference in internal affair was not kept by the British resident. Therefore, 1809, Diwan Velu Thampi revolted with the help of peasant and Nayar troops, and this revolt was the crushed Carnatic. In 1801, Karnataka was annexed by the Wellesley after the death of Ali Muhammad Ali along Anglo-Maratha War. First Anglo-Maratha War was in 1775 to 82. Second Anglo-Maratha War was in 1803 to 05. Third Anglo-Maratha War in 1817 to 19. Importance of Deccan and for British. Large coastal area, that is the vast coast with the Marathas, Konkan coast and the some Malabar coast. High cotton trade with the China from Gujarat. First Anglo-Maratha War in 1775 to 82. Reason: Raghunath Rao was removed as the Peshwa in the Barbhai conspiracy by the Nana Fadnavis, as Raghunath Rao had become a Peshwa after the killing of Narayan Rao. Now Raghunath Rao went to EIC in the Bombay and signed the Treaty of the Surat and led to the first Anglo-Maratha War. Treaty of the Surat 1775. The governor of Bombay Presidency of EIC agreed to help the Raghunath Rao to regain Peshwaship, and the return the Raghunath Rao promised Salsette and the basin near the Bombay. Even after resulting Act of 1773 by the British Parliament, Governor of Bombay and Madras were the subordinated to the Governor General of Bengal in matters of war and peace, except in emergency circumstances when they could act as independently. Therefore, the Governor of Bombay acted independently by the signing the Treaty of Surat. The prevent war expenditure, Governor General of Bombay overthrew the Treaty of Surat and negotiated a Treaty of Porbandar. EIC recognized Madhav Rao II as a Peshwa, and EIC got Salsette and Basin Maratha to not allow the French any position in their dominance. There, however, Nana Fadnavis gave the French a port. Therefore, treaty could not finalize and war resumed. By 1782, British were defeated. A contributory factor was the alliance between Indian powers. However, it was an inclusive victory. Therefore, the Marathas signed a Treaty of Salbai, whereby was ended, and the Maratha got back their treaty with EIC. British recognized Madhav Rao II as the Peshwa. British retained the Salsette, and France to not allow in any position. Raghunath Rao was the pensioned of Second Anglo-Maratha War 1803 to 05. Background: due to the high war expenditure to Pitt's India Act of 1784 banned imperial expansion, but this policy charged with the Wellesley. In 1802, Wellesley signed a subsidiary alliance with Gaikwad of Baroda in return for help in the succession dispute. Reason for war: Wellesley was an empire builder. Fractionalism rose in the Maratha polity after the suicide of Peshwa Madhav Rao due to the over-controlling Nana Fadnavis and the increased opposition to Nanas. The Baji Rao II, son of Raghunath Rao, wanted to remove the influence of Nana Fadnavis. In 1800, Nana Fadnavis, who could have kept Maratha Sardar, died. Therefore, fractionalism increased further. In 1802, Holkar of Indore defeated Sindhya and also Baji Rao II. Now, Baji Rao II went to EIC to regain Peshwaship and signed a Treaty of Basin in 1803, whereby the signed the subsidiary alliance with EIC, and now the Second Anglo-Maratha War began. Result: EIC was the victorious in the war. Subsidiary alliance signed with Sindhya. Sindhya lost all territory north of Yamuna including Delhi and Agra and all his part of Gujarat. Bhosle of Nagpur lost Orissa to EIC. Tributaries of Marathas lost those who pay annual tributes like Jat, Bundelkhand, Rajputs, and Rohillas signed a subsidiary alliance with EIC. Due to the high war expenditure, Wellesley was the recalled, and Cornwallis again made the Governor General of Bengal with the clear instruction to follow the policy of non-interference and no expansion, the policy of paramountcy. 1813. It means that henceforth a new policy of paramountcy was initiated by the Hastings. The British were to be the significant supremacy power among all other forces in India. Therefore, British interests were to be the paramount, and to protect these the paramount interest, British to have the right to in their interfere in the internal affairs of India state and even the right to annex Indian state. Therefore, from 1813, Indian states were to have no right to British inter, interests demanded so. Indian state had the right over internal affairs in subsidiary alliance. Therefore, the paramountcy was a subsidiary alliance less any right for the Indian state. Third Anglo-Maratha War 1817 to 19. Reason for the war. The policy of paramountcy again gave a push to imperial expansion. Since 1803, the subsidiary alliance Peshwa Bajirao II was the puppet of EIC and now wanted to regain independence from EIC control. Also, the policy of non-interference since 1805 allowed the Marathas Sardar to consolidate power and feel the confident military. Therefore, Baji Rao II allied with the Marathas to overthrow British dominance and Third Anglo-Maratha War began. Result of the war. EIC was victorious in this war. The Peshwaship was abolished. Therefore, the Peshwa Baji Rao II was the last Peshwa. Maharashtra, which is the Saurashtra, was annexed by the British. A subsidiary alliance was signed with the Holkar and Bhosle and lost significant territory to EIC. Therefore, by the 1819, EIC has total control over all territory of south of Vindhyas. Annexation of Awadh, Dalhousie. He implemented and used the policy of paramountcy to expand the British Empire in India. He annexed territories in following ways: annexing territory instead of payment of subsidy. For example, bearer from Hyderabad in 1853 by the fighting wars of example and Second Anglo-Sikh War that led to the annexation of Punjab via doctrine of lapse, which was the product of the policy of paramountcy. Under those state was the annex where there was a legal there that is no biological heir of the ruler. The annexation was justified as and the unclear line of succession could lead to political instability due to succession dispute, therefore putting the British interest under the threat. Examples of such annexation under the doctrine of lapse: Sambhalpur 1849, Bhagat 1850, Satara 1848, Udaipur 1852, Nagpur 1853, Jhansi 1854. To protect the British paramount's interest from the maladministration in Awadh, he annexed the Awadh in 1856. He safeguarded British paramount interest from the threat of neighbors' power, and he fought and won the Second Burma War and annexed the Pegu in Lower Burma. Second Anglo-Sikh War to prevent an possibility to Russia influence in India via Afghanistan. Class 15. Annexation of Awadh. Treaty of Allahabad was from the subsidiary alliance SA, but the concrete shape was given by the Wellesley in Wellesley 1898-05, when the formal subsidiary alliance treaty was signed in 1801. Awadh was important as 3/5 of the indigo cultivation was in Awadh, plus importance of the export of Awadh raw cotton to China. Subsidy demanded under the Treaty of Allahabad 1765 was gradually increased by the EIC to the compensate from high war expenditure. The arrival of the Wellesley 1905, he interfered in the succession of the Awadh after the death of Asaf-ud-Dawla 7597, and EIC refused the accept. His son Wazir Ali 9798 was the Nawab and made uncle Sadat Ali Khan second Nawab in 1798 in return for some territory and 76 lakh rupees as annual subsidy. Conflict across with the Sadat Ali Khan II due to the interference due to British resident plus the misuse of the dastak since 1765 plus Nawab defaulted on the payment of subsidy in 1801. Therefore, now the Richard Wellesley 9805 sent his brother Henry to impose a subsidiary alliance on Awadh in 1801, plus half of the Awadh was annexed as the paramount payment of the subsidiary. Land revenue from this treaty equal to 1.3 crores versus justified/decided 76 lakh. Therefore, the EIC annexed the Gorakhpur Rohilkhand Doab. Dispute departments payment of subsidy. EIC continued to demand more money. Therefore, Nawab was forced to increase taxes and become unpopular among the Jamindar and the peasant. Plus, now the oppression of the peasant due to the high land revenue. Therefore, fear of peasant and revolt by the 1855 2 plus by 1855, British resident become the real center of the power. For example, held in the formal court, and therefore regarding the status of Nawab. Now the Dalhousie at 4856 annexed the Nawab of maladministration, Nawab Wazid Ali Shah, while in recently high subsidiary demand was the responsible for the situation, but Nawab had no power and all responsibility as the British resident, established indirect rule. In 1856, Dalhousie annexed the rest of the Awadh on the ground of maladministration to protect British paramount's interest of trade and the businesses in Awadh. Anglo-Sikh War. The background. As per the policy of the ring fence, the British also wanted stable frontiers to ensure the protection of the British Empire from the neighbors' invasion. If the neighboring power threatened the frontier or the frontier state became the weak, then the British acted and annexed the frontier state or tried to establish indirect rule in the border Indian state or the immediate neighborhood of India. Example in Afghanistan. Make in फ्लो चार्ट फ्रॉम द ब्रॉडर एरियाज कर सकते हैं अपने खुद माइंड में. रीजन फॉर द फर्स्ट एंग्लो सिख वार 1845. फर्स्ट आफ्टर द डेथ ऑफ द महाराजा रणजीत सिंह 0139, fractionalism increased in the Punjab polity with the rivalries between the Sindhyawalas, Misl chief, and the Dogra from Jammu, poor Wazir, the Khalsa army, and the prominence of the royal family. Also, there was the succession dispute and the political murders. Plus, There was the rise of the Khalsa army as the political power in the Sikh polity. It tackled about its idea of the rule of the panchayat, which the threatened to the British. Therefore, the political instability in the frontier state plus rise of the Khalsa army as a political player led to action by the British in the form of the First Anglo-Sikh War, where British plus the Dogras versus Sikh state, GGI versus Harding 1844 to 48 result. This led to the humiliating Treaty of the Lahore 1846, where first the size of the Khalsa army was the decreased and the EIC army was stationed. B. EIC annexed Jalandhar Doab. C. Kashmir was given to the Raja Gulab Singh Dogra of Jammu. D. Maharaja Dilip Singh for 43-49 is now to be advised by the British resident. That is the policy of the indirect rule was the initiated. There was another treaty in the December 1846 whereby the murder of Dilip Singh was removed as a reason, and the Regency Council headed by the British resident was set up. Therefore, the British control of military and internal administration. Second Anglo-Sikh War 1848 to 49 by the Dalhousie 48-46 reason. Two Sikh chiefs governor and revolted against the British plus Dalhousie 48-46 was empire builder. Result full annexation of Punjab, expansionism of British. With the empire building, the core kept on the expanding, leading to new fears about the protecting the core and the leading to the further empire building. Therefore, the 9th century saw a series of the annexation and wars by the British. Proof. The First Burma War. The region Bengal frontier was under the threat due to the expansionist Burma in the 8th and the 18th and 19th century. Burma had met the Manipur and the Kasar and the Assam. It's a sphere of the influence in 19th century. After the 6 years of now war, after the Third Anglo-Maratha War 1817 to 19, the EIC army wanted sometimes therefore the argued that expansion by the Burma inspiring India rulers against EIC, and this led to the First Burma War 1824 to 28. The result, Treaty of the Yandobo, Assam and the Nagaland annexed plus the Arkan Tensionaries Lower Burma annexed. Later in 1830, Kasar annexed. The Kurg was the annex in 1834, and the Kurg became the first coffee producing area. First Afghan War 1838 to 42 reason fear of the Russia, that is the northwest frontier. Result, British established indirect rule in the Afghanistan. Sindh was annexed in 1843. Annexation by the Dalhousie, Sambhalpur in 1849. Bhagat in 1850. Udaipur in 1852. Nagpur in 1853 and Jhansi in 1854. Second Burma War 1852 to 53 annexed Pegu. In 1853, bearer of Hyderabad was annexed instead of subsidiary under the Subsidiary Alliance 1798. In 1856, the annexation of Awadh was on the grounds of maladministration. Now more annexation were done after the revolt of 1857. By 1857, Indian British India indirect rule of EIC and was 67% of territory and the 78% of the population, and the rest were 565 princely estate indirectly ruled via the policy of paramountcy. Revolt of 1857. Questions. What began as the fight for the religious ended as the War of Independence, as there is no doubt that the rebel wanted to get rid of the alliance government and restore the old order of which the King of Delhi as the rightful respective. Do you support this view? 1857 revolts is equal to Sepoy mutiny plus civil rebellion slash uprising. Reason: the grievances of Sepoy services related. The discrimination between the Indian sepoy and European sepoy in salary and pensions. B. There was a focus on building a uniform military culture by the British and decrease in the financial expenditure which the contribute to the grievances of sepoy. C. 2. Compensate for high war expenditure. There was a decrease in the salary of the sepoy. Plus, in 1856, there was an end of the allowance for the services outside their region, and which the caused grievances among the sepoy. Social religious. A. There was the high racism towards Indian sepoy, for example, where they usually referred to as the sword या pig. B. There was a Christian missionary in the breaks with the create the fear of the conversion among the Indian sepoy. C. Since the 1813 Chartered Act, there was the focus on the westernization of Indian, including the spread of the Christianity in India. D. Anglo-British now tried to develop a uniform culture in the army as it would lead to the better control over the sepoys, increase and unity among the sepoy over the time, increase loyalty to the caste and the religion, and increase the commitment to the employers. E. There was also a rumors of mixing cow and pig bones dust with the flour and a rumor of the cartilage of the new infield rifle that replaced brown base musket having the grass made of cow and pig fat, and they were to be the beaten of before loading. Political reason. A. Awadh was annexed in 1856. Agrarian slash economic grievances. A. Sepoy was the peasant in uniform since he come from the peasant family and therefore was hurt by the loss of the family land to British government due to the high land revenue and to the money lenders due to the independentness. B. Also, now the rulers' population joined their sepoy mutiny was the followed by the civil rebellion. A reason for the civil rebellion: feudal elements slash Raja's mobility. A. Loss of the kingdom due to the annexation by the British by the application of the doctrine of lapse or taking over the Awadh on the grounds of the maladministration lead to grievances among the dispossessed ruler. B. These annexations were done in the line with the policy of paramountcy. Example: Satara 1848, Nagpur, Sambhalpur and Bhagat 1850, Udaipur 1852 and Jhansi 1853. Doctrine of lapse, along with the Nawab and entire aristocracy was negatively affected. Therefore, these disposed princes offered leadership. Big landowners slash talukadars slash jamindars. A. Application of the Malwari settlement in northwest provinces and Awadh lead to the loss of the land for the talukadars, as in this system land ownership in many cases was given to the actual cultivators, leading to the loss of personal estates for the talukadars. Therefore, it led to the loss of the economic status. B. British focused on the building a a strong centralized state, and therefore the private fort and private armies of talukadars were the disbanded, leading to a loss of military status. North, there was to be the rule of law under the British, that is the equality, therefore the law which hurt their the social status, and therefore the talukadas provided leadership to the peasant, artisan slash peasant. A artisan were the utterly destroyed by the British made mechanisms, as the machine mechanism produced a cheaper and better quality product. P. Peasant high land revenue and the debtedness to the moneylenders, which lead to the landlessness. Religion. The whole ruled society had a fear that their religion is under threat. A. Since 1813, there was the inflow of Christianity missionary, and there were forced conversion under the policy protection. B. The socio-religious reform of the British, for example, the Widow Remarriage Act 1856, escalated the fear of the British wanted to destroy traditional customs and religious practices. C. They gave the right for inheritance to those who converted the Christianity, and therefore the escalated religious conversions. D. British began taxing revenues free lands to religious sects, mosques, and the temples, and therefore the Hindus and Muslims both felt the threat to their religion, and Pandit and Maulvis spread hatred against the British among the people. There was the common feeling among the Indian that British rule is the immoral due to the all of the above mentioned grievances, and therefore the goal of the 1857 revolt was the restored the pre-British order, political, economic, and social and religious agent. Sadhus and Maulvis were the agent of the spreading the hatred against the British. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe our channel and share with 5 friends.